All right, so hopefully we're on the second lecture now. We've moved forward in time 2 days, so hopefully it's Wednesday. And last time we talked about essay writing being in 4 stages: getting your evidence and starting to synthesize it. Now we're in stage 2, which is arranging and planning the evidence, and we're going to do a little bit more on that today, and then go through to the all-important 3rd stage of actually writing your draft. But that's not writing the essay, it's writing the draft. And then next time we'll talk about a bit more of writing and then editing, which is just such a crucial final stage. So what I'm first going to talk about is how to structure your essay, because this is something that I would say 99% of undergraduates do not know how to do, and I include myself in that. I didn't know how to do it as an undergrad either. So again, all this stuff I had to be trained in and learn through blood and suffering. So hopefully we can avoid the blood and suffering for everyone today. So last time we talked a little bit about spider diagrams. You don't have to do spider diagrams. Morgan and I just learned hate spiders, or hate spider diagrams. But however you start to think of your evidence, we're looking at going from your notes to heavily synthesized notes that you can then start to order, you can then start to structure. So that synthesizing process has to be robust. You have to find some way of synthesizing this blizzard of information. Too much. Some way of synthesizing that blizzard of information into something that's manageable for, a 12-page research essay, or a 20-page research essay, or a 50-page thesis, whatever you're doing. But crucially, you have to synthesize your evidence in a way that allows relationships across the text to come out. Otherwise, all you're going to be doing when you come to structure your essay is going through the damn novel chronologically, which you don't want to do. Or like ordering it around characters or something awful like that. And now I'm going to talk about Mr. Darcy. Don't do that. So what you do here determines your success at this stage. So you can do spider diagrams. And when I demonstrated this last time, I did, one big spider body, and then I had legs, and then I had intersections with other, maybe big spiders, or other little legs of spiders, something like that. But you could also think of several big ideas that you might want to talk about, like several big spiders, and dot them fairly far away from each other like that. And then see where they intersect. So let's say you were doing Huxley's Brave New World, and let's say some of your spiders were like sex, drugs. We can't do rock and roll, so let's do religion. Obviously there are loads of spider legs popping off of all of these, and you couldn't do everything. But what would be interesting is if there were ways in which legs from these spiders intersected. So obviously the orgy that Bernard goes to is highly connected with drugs because they're all hooked up on Soma, but it's also highly connected with religion. So there are 2 big spider bodies, each of which share the leg of the orgy. This phrase, orgy-porgy, is obviously really related to sex as well. And Linnea and everyone else likes to get off their face on Soma when they have sex, which makes this kind of weird connection between the way in which the more like secular religious practices, the quasi-religious practices that have replaced religion in Aldous Huxley's Brave New World, are also connected with like drugs and sex. So Again, we don't know what we're going to say about that yet, but we know that if we were interested in writing a research paper on one or more of these themes, the way in which the themes interconnect at key moments in the novel are going to be things we're definitely going to write about over here. So when your spider diagrams intersect at a particular theme or a moment from the novel or a quotation, you're probably going to want to have those intersecting moments up here. So your paragraphs in your essay are going to be moments where evidence intersects. Because you can't talk about everything, right? We've talked about this a lot, but there's way too much information in a novel. Everyone is going to have way too many notes to talk about everything in an essay. And if you just start writing the essay without doing this process, you might just be like going through your evidence chronologically rather than prioritizing your evidence based on how much that evidence can do for you. How much can you say about that evidence? Because obviously, if your evidence talks about more than one theme, more than one concept, more than one idea in the novel, there's a lot for you to say about it. You could even have more than one paragraph on the same section, should you so choose. Morgan, what do you do instead of spider diagrams?
I'm just a really terrible person. Put it all into one massive document and organize it in my head.
Yes, so there you go. You're using genetic gifts rather than process. So
I will use the process.
use it. Practice the process, because even if you don't need it. I don't always do spider diagrams. If I've got like color-coded notes, I will color code them a second time. So like I'll go for intersectionality that way. I don't care what the hell you do. Use cat stickers. Like seriously, you could do that, it would work. Like different cats denote certain different kinds of evidence for you. But you've got to find some way of organizing your evidence so that you're not a prisoner of the chronology of the novel. If you just follow the chronology of the novel in your structure, you're never going to get above a B, probably. So now let's move on to here. Let's assume that you're working on this process. It might take a few years to fully get there, but try it anyway. Now we've got to get to how the hell do you structure an essay? Structuring the essay is so hard to do, so don't feel bad if you can't do it yet. I need more space. So the first thing to say is that you don't have to have a bulletproof rationale for the order in which you put your major claims. So remember, a paragraph, you have a new paragraph when you have something new. One major claim per paragraph, and you only transition to a new paragraph when you've got a new claim to make. It will still be supporting your overall argument that you've made in your introduction. I'll talk about this more when we come to actually writing the essay. But it will be a somewhat new claim, otherwise there's no point in creating a new paragraph. And your paragraph should almost never be more than a page long, because then you haven't prioritized your evidence correctly. You should be able to make a claim that supports your overall argument and support it with the most pertinent, best performing piece of evidence or pieces of intersecting evidence. Rationalize your interpretation of that evidence, and then just move on to the next damn paragraph. You don't have to have an inordinate amount of evidence to make a claim. Your evidence needs to be strong enough that your claim is plausible. And remember, the more extraordinary the claim, the more extraordinary the evidence that's required. But more or less, a paragraph should never be more than a page long. So, when it comes to ordering your evidence, you need to get away from the prison of the order in which the author has presented the evidence to you. Otherwise, you're just writing the essay the author wants you to write. And don't do that, because we know authors don't know what they're doing when they write a novel. So how do we do this? The best way to talk about what I like to think of as aggressive structuring where you, the writer, determine what you say and when you say it, is I like to talk about dialectics. So remember that Hegelian dialectics is thesis, antithesis, synthesis. This is how you make an argument for Hegel. So you'll have a thesis. Let's see if the green works. Yes. Let's say your thesis is all frogs are evil. And then you might say, no, my pet toad, Bokanovsky, wasn't evil. So that's the antithesis. So that's a piece of evidence that conflicts with your original statement. The synthesis, the final stage for Hegel, is when you try and bring these two opposing views together in some way. And obviously this isn't always possible. If they're completely antithetical, your conclusion is just going to have to be, we're going to agree to disagree. But here we can say, all frogs are evil except Bokanovsky, which probably indicates that only some frogs are evil, right? I'm not suggesting you do Hegelian dialectics for a research essay. It probably wouldn't work very well. But what this does do is demonstrate how structure can be an active process rather than just something that happens passively along the way. So remember, when literature professors ask you for an argument, what they're asking for is something that is not a statement of fact about the novel, that is debatable, that someone could argue against it, and hopefully that argument helps us understand the text better. So when it comes to a literature essay, you could think of the dialectical model, if it's a short essay, as paragraphs. So you've made your introduction, you've made your overall argument. Here's your first body paragraph, thesis, second body paragraph, antithesis, third body paragraph, synthesis, and then you do your conclusion. Again, I'm not suggesting you actually do this, but this is an example of how each paragraph doesn't just have a role of elucidating evidence that contributes to the discussion of your argument. Each paragraph builds your argument in some way. So last time I was talking about how Lenina is more complex than she appears. So your thesis might be, it may appear that Lenina is a two-dimensional character of no real importance to the novel. That would be your thesis, and that would be a reasonable statement to make, because lots of criticism does in fact say that about Lenina. So when you do your literature review or your references to criticism, you can use that to validate why you would even mention this. Then you can move to a more specific methodological practice. You could use close analysis, you could do a close reading of that scene where Lenina and John almost have sex, and you could talk about Lenina's clear agency and clear intensity of feeling in that scene, which indicates that she is, a living being with desires that haven't been programmed out of her. So the John sex scene. So that would be the antithesis. That would be a discussion of how this thesis does not describe, in fact, Lenina in toto. But then you'd have to come to a conclusion about what you were going to do with the synthesis. What does that mean? And that would be determined by what other evidence you wanted to talk about in the novel, what other claims you wanted to make. If you wanted to come to a conclusion that there were multiple characters like Lenina in the novel, even like the characters that John takes the soma from, for instance, then your synthesis might be Aldous Huxley is saying that human nature is complex and can't easily be engineered out, and it's a hopeful conclusion. I believe in human nature, so that could be hope. Or if you wanted to focus on the number of characters who show deep moral failings in the novel, like Mustafa Mond, Linda, Pope, Bernard, then you could say, yes, there is some hope, but really the lesson of Lenina is that we should be extremely careful of ideological programming, and we shouldn't assume that human nature can hold out against it totally, that the hope is an illusion. Something like that. So again, I'm not suggesting you actually do this, but this is a clear example of structure being aggressive, forming your approach to the text. So let's talk about something that is more useful. Okay, when we think of research papers, we're probably thinking of at least 10 pages. So I'm asking for 10 to 12 in this course, and sometimes I'll ask for more than that, and if you're in an advanced course or a thesis, you'll be doing 20 to 50 pages. That indicates that you can't just daisy chain, if it's a 50-page undergraduate or master's thesis, you can't just daisy chain. If it's 50 pages, there's probably at least 55 paragraphs in there. You can't just daisy chain 55 paragraphs together. It's never going to work. So you have to immediately start to think of sections. And sections, whether or not they're indicated by a subtitle, are defined by ideas that are in close proximity to each other. So you'll still have paragraphs. You might have 2 paragraphs in a section, or you might have 4 paragraphs in a section. Whatever, it's kind of up to you. But the crucial part is that in a short essay, like 5 pages, you'll probably have a maximum of 4 body paragraphs, which means you've got 4 major claims